A side street in an industrial district. A woman stumbles along the sidewalk, her hand reaching for the wall to steady herself. She's barely keeping her balance. Behind her, 3 men walk at a measured pace. Not rushing, not helping, just following, watching her struggle. This is Grayson Mills, Arizona, March 8, 2024. The woman is Angela Porter, 38, mother of 4 children. The 3 men behind her are Jerome Pfizer, 37, Carl Brennan, 55, and Thomas Ridley, 63. And what appears in this footage to be a woman who's had too much to drink is actually the beginning of something far worse. A calculated plan that would end with Angela's body found in an abandoned warehouse 6 days later. But the story doesn't start here. It starts 3 weeks earlier, outside a bar called Murphy's on the edge of Grayson Mills. That's where Angela had been spending her afternoons for the past month. Sitting on the sidewalk near the entrance asking for spare change from people going in and out, Angela wasn't houseless. She had an apartment. She had 4 children ages 1, 3, 5, and 7. But she was barely surviving. The fathers of her children had all left at various points. No child support, no contact. Angela worked when she could find shifts, cleaning jobs, kitchen work, but it was never enough. The bills piled up. The rent was always late. And feeding 4 kids on what she made was impossible. So Angela started asking for help outside Murphy's. Most people ignored her. Some gave $1 or $2. It was humiliating, but she was desperate. Jerome, Carl, and Thomas were regulars at Murphy's. They'd known each other for years, spent most afternoons drinking at the bar, had nowhere else to be, and nothing else to do. None of them had steady work. Carl picked up odd jobs occasionally. Thomas was on disability. Jerome did some construction work when it was available, but mostly he just drank. They noticed Angela, started talking about her, made comments when she wasn't around. And then one day, Jerome had an idea. It was late February when Jerome first approached Angela. He said he and his friends had been talking. They knew she needed money. They might be able to help. Did she have any work experience? What kind of jobs was she looking for? Angela was cautious at first, but Jerome seemed sincere. He said he had a friend who owned a cleaning company, might be hiring, could put in a word for her if she was interested. Angela said yes. Absolutely. Anything that paid. Jerome said he'd make some calls, check back with him in a few days. A week later, Jerome approached Angela again, said his friend was interested, wanted to meet her, talk about the position. But the friend was busy. Would Angela be willing to come inside Murphy's? Have a conversation with Jerome and his friends about what the job would entail, what the hours were, what she should expect? Angela hesitated. She didn't usually go into bars, didn't drink, couldn't afford to, but this was about a job, about helping her kids. She agreed. On March 8th, around 2 in the afternoon, Angela met Jerome, Carl, and Thomas inside Murphy's. They sat at a corner table, ordered drinks, offered Angela a drink. She declined at first, said she didn't drink, but they insisted. Just one, to celebrate the job opportunity, to relax. She'd been through so much stress, they said. She deserved to unwind a little. Angela accepted one drink. Then they ordered her another. She protested. They said it was fine. They were buying. She should enjoy herself. She'd been working so hard, taking care of her kids alone. She needed this. Angela wasn't used to alcohol. The drinks hit her fast. Jerome, Carl, and Thomas kept talking about the job, kept asking her questions, kept ordering more drinks. Angela lost track of how many she'd had. The room started spinning. She felt sick. Around 4 in the afternoon, Angela said she needed to leave, had to get back to her kids. Her neighbor was watching them, but she needed to be home. Jerome said of course they'd help her get home. She was in no condition to walk alone. They paid the tab, helped Angela stand. She could barely walk. They guided her out of Murphy's, one on each side holding her arms, the third walking behind. That's when the security camera across the street captured the footage. Angela stumbling, the 3 men following. 10 seconds of video showing Angela barely able to stay upright, and the 3 men calmly walking behind her as she disappeared around a corner. Angela's neighbor, Doris, started worrying around 6 in the evening when Angela hadn't come back. Angela always picked up her kids by 5:30 at the latest. Doris called Angela's phone. No answer. Called again an hour later. Still nothing. By 8 o'clock, Doris called the police. Told them Angela had left that afternoon and never returned. Said Angela had 4 young children who needed their mother. Said this wasn't like her. Angela was struggling, but she was devoted to her kids. Would never just disappear. Police took the report. Asked if Angela had any history of substance use or mental health issues. Doris said no. Angela didn't drink, didn't use drugs. She'd been under a lot of stress financially, but she wasn't unstable. Officers checked Angela's apartment. Her phone was there, left behind. Her wallet was there. She'd left with nothing except what she was wearing. Police canvassed the neighborhood, asked if anyone had seen her. No one had, except for the security camera footage that would surface 3 days later. A business owner near Murphy's reviewed his security footage at police request, found the clip of Angela stumbling down the sidewalk with 3 men behind her. Police pulled still images from the footage, circulated them, asked if anyone recognized the men. A bartender at Murphy's identified all 3 immediately. Jerome Pfizer, Carl Brennan, Thomas Ridley, regulars, had been there that afternoon with a woman matching Angela's description. The bartender remembered because it was unusual. Those 3 never brought women to the bar, and this woman had looked uncomfortable, out of place. Police located Jerome first, on March 12th, brought him in for questioning. He admitted Angela had been with them at Murphy's, said they'd talked to her about a job opportunity, had a few drinks. She'd left on her own around 4 in the afternoon. Said she'd seemed fine when she left, but the security footage told a different story. Angela hadn't been fine. She'd been barely able to walk, and the 3 men hadn't just let her leave. They'd followed her. Police arrested Jerome, then found Carl and Thomas within hours, brought all 3 in separately for interrogation. Their stories started to fall apart immediately. Carl claimed they'd walked Angela partway home to make sure she was safe, then left her at a corner and went their separate ways. Couldn't explain why they hadn't mentioned this initially. Thomas said they'd helped Angela because she was drunk, but she'd insisted she was fine, so they'd let her go. Couldn't explain why the security footage showed them following her, not walking beside her to help. Jerome changed his story 3 times. First said Angela left alone, then said they walked with her briefly, then said they'd gone a different direction entirely, and didn't know where Angela went after leaving the bar. Police knew they were lying. The question was why? And where was Angela? Detectives pulled phone records for all 3 men, found text messages between them from the days before Angela disappeared, messages about the plan, about making sure she drinks enough, about the warehouse. One message from Jerome to Carl: "She's perfect, nobody's looking for her. Nobody cares." Another from Thomas to Jerome: "Warehouse is ready. No cameras, nobody goes there." The texts painted a clear picture. This wasn't about helping Angela find a job. This was a planned abduction, and they'd used her desperation, her need to provide for her children, to lure her in. Police located the warehouse mentioned in the texts, an abandoned industrial building on the outskirts of Grayson Mills that had been vacant for years. Thomas's brother-in-law owned the property but hadn't visited it in months. Officers entered the warehouse on March 14th, 6 days after Angela disappeared, found a back room with evidence of recent activity, and found Angela. She was dead. The medical examiner's report would later detail the horrific extent of what had been done to her over those 6 days. Multiple injuries, evidence of prolonged torture, burn marks, trauma consistent with repeated sexual assault. Cause of death was determined to be a combination of injuries and dehydration. Angela had suffered for days before her body finally gave out. Confronted with the discovery of Angela's body and the physical evidence from the warehouse, all 3 men confessed. But even in their confessions, they tried to minimize what they'd done. Jerome claimed it had started as a joke. They'd talked about getting Angela drunk, scaring her a little, but things had gotten out of hand. When pressed on what that meant, he admitted they'd taken her to the warehouse, but claimed he hadn't wanted to hurt her, that Carl and Thomas had been the violent ones. Carl blamed Jerome, said Jerome had been the one planning it all, that he and Thomas had just gone along, said he felt bad about what happened but didn't know how to stop it once it started. Thomas claimed he'd only been present, said he hadn't participated in the assaults, hadn't hurt Angela, just watched, as if that made him less culpable. But the evidence showed all 3 had participated. DNA evidence. Video footage they'd recorded on their phones, showing all 3 men assaulting Angela at different times over the 6 days. Messages between them coordinating who would go to the warehouse when. Making sure Angela was never left alone. Discussing what they'd do to her next. The investigation revealed this hadn't been their first time. Detectives found older videos on Thomas's phone. Other women, other locations. Some of the women were identified and contacted. Most were too traumatized to provide statements. Others had reported assaults years ago that were never fully investigated. Jerome, Carl, and Thomas had been doing this for years, finding vulnerable women, those experiencing houselessness, addiction, poverty, women they thought no one would miss or believe, women they thought they could hurt without consequences. Angela wasn't their first victim, but she was the first who died. And that's what finally brought them down. The trial began in September 2024. The evidence was overwhelming. The security footage showing them following Angela, the text messages planning the abduction, the warehouse where Angela's body was found, the videos on their phones, the medical examiner's testimony about what Angela endured. The defense tried to argue varying degrees of culpability. Each defendant's attorney claimed their client was less involved than the others, had been coerced or pressured, but the evidence showed they'd all participated willingly, enthusiastically. They'd planned it, executed it, and would have continued if Angela's neighbor hadn't reported her missing quickly enough to lead police to them before they could cover their tracks. The jury convicted all three men on all counts: kidnapping, torture, sexual assault, and first-degree murder. Each received life without the possibility of parole. At sentencing, Angela's sister spoke on behalf of the family. She talked about Angela's struggles, about how hard Angela had tried to provide for her 4 children despite having no support, no resources, about how Angela's desperation, her need to feed her kids, had been weaponized by 3 men who saw vulnerability as opportunity. "My sister was targeted because she was poor," Angela's sister said. "Because she was asking for help outside a bar. Because these men thought she was invisible, that no one cared about her. But we cared. Her children cared. And they have to grow up knowing their mother died in that warehouse, tortured by men who promised to help her." The owner of Murphy's bar was questioned extensively about why Angela had been allowed to become so intoxicated, why staff hadn't intervened when they noticed her condition. The bartender testified he'd thought Angela was there willingly, that she was with friends, didn't realize she was being set up. Murphy's implemented new policies after Angela's death: training for staff to recognize signs of predatory behavior, protocols for when customers appear to be in danger. But advocates said it wasn't enough, that establishments need to do more to protect vulnerable patrons, especially women. The abandoned warehouse where Angela died has been demolished. The property owner, horrified by what his building had been used for, had it torn down immediately. The land remains vacant. Jerome Pfizer, Carl Brennan, and Thomas Ridley are incarcerated at separate maximum security facilities. Other inmates, learning why they're there, have ensured their time is difficult. All 3 have been placed in protective custody after multiple assaults. None have shown genuine remorse. In letters and statements, they've continued to blame each other, to minimize their own roles, to claim they didn't mean for Angela to die. But the videos they recorded, the messages they exchanged, the evidence of what they did, it all shows men who enjoyed what they were doing, who saw Angela's suffering as entertainment. Angela Porter is buried in Grayson Mills. Her headstone lists her name and the phrase her family chose: devoted mother, taken too soon. Her 4 children visit when they're old enough to understand where their mother is. The security footage showing Angela stumbling down the sidewalk while 3 men followed has never been publicly released. It remains sealed in evidence. A 10-second clip that captured the last time Angela was seen alive before being taken to the warehouse. Angela's story became a catalyst for changes in how missing persons cases involving vulnerable populations are handled in Grayson Mills. Police now respond more urgently to reports involving individuals experiencing poverty or houselessness. Advocacy groups work with businesses to train staff on recognizing exploitation. Angela didn't have to be outside that bar asking for money. Her sister said if the fathers of her children had been held accountable for support, if she'd been able to earn a living wage, if there had been adequate assistance for single mothers, she wouldn't have been desperate enough to trust those men. The system failed her long before they did. Angela's children are being raised with knowledge of who their mother was, a woman who loved them, who tried her best, who made one mistake, trusting the wrong people at the worst possible time. They're told their mother was brave, that she fought to survive, that she had thought of them until the end. Whether that's true, whether Angela thought of her children during those 6 days in the warehouse, no one knows. But it's what the children are told, and it's what they need to believe. Predators don't always look dangerous. Sometimes they look like men offering help, and the most vulnerable among us, those asking for help, those in desperate situations, are the ones they target. Because they believe no one will notice, no one will care. Angela Porter's children prove they were wrong. Someone noticed. Someone cared. And 3 men will spend the rest of their lives in prison because of it.